Technology is wonderful when it works, but I don't want anybody to feel like they are missing any moment of our programming this evening. I think everybody is in now, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Ginny, and I am the Director of Events and Marketing with Anderson's Bookshops. We'd like to take a moment to thank you for joining us tonight to talk books with us and health in this case. For those of you not familiar with us, Anderson's is an independent bookstore outside of Chicago. We have 2 locations in Naperville and Downers Grove. We have been owned and run by the Anderson family for going on 6 generations now, which actually makes us the oldest single family run bookseller in the country. So we're very proud of our history and very glad to have you with us. The reason we can be here and continue to do things is and have the history in our communities is because of your support. So we do just like to take a moment to say thank you. COVID has obviously made the world an entirely different place for everyone, but from a bookstore event point of view, this is where we are right now. But your attendance here, your support and purchases at our store means that even though I feel like the light at the end of the tunnel does keep moving a little bit, it is there and we can see it. And it's because of your support. So we just like to say thank you. We do have lots of other events going on, so I would be remiss if I did not ask you to visit our website, andersonsbookshop.com, or any of our social media pages to find your next read or your next great event with us. There's a lot coming up. Virtually, we have Lindsey Vaughn tomorrow night to kick off the Olympic Winter Games, and Noah Hawley in a couple of weeks as well, who directed Fargo. For those of you who watched that, has got a great new novel out. And then next month, we are going to start with some in person, although hopefully the weather holds out. Dr. Davis and I were just talking about if we had this in person tonight, we would have had to cancel because of all the snow here in the area. But next month, we are launching our in-person events with the one and only Bob Odenkirk, who's actually from Naperville. So that's going to be a great night. Visit our website for details on all of those things. Quick accessibility note, we have turned on the live transcript feature. So if you'd like subtitles or a full transcript as provided by Zoom, you can choose that using the live transcript or CC button at the bottom of your own screen. You can also turn that off if that's what you would like. But tonight we are happy to be celebrating the release of Supergut, the next book by William Davis, MD. Dr. Davis is a renowned preventative cardiologist and author of the groundbreaking #1 New York Times bestseller, Wheat Belly, 3 other New York Times bestsellers, Wheat Belly Cookbook, Wheat Belly 30 Minutes or Less Cookbook, and Wheat Belly Total Health, and several other books, including Wheat Belly 10-Day Green Detox and Undoctored. He is a graduate of the St. Louis University School of Medicine with training in internal medicine and cardiovascular disease and advanced training in angioplasty at the Case Western Reserve University Hospitals, where he also served as director of the Cardiovascular Fellowship and assistant professor of medicine. He's joining us tonight from his home in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So welcome, Dr. Davis. Thanks for being with us.
So, thank you, Ginny. And thank you to Anderson's Bookshops for being so gracious to bring me on. Now, give me a moment. I'm going to share some slides. So I do this every Wednesday night, but still no faster at it. Ginny, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. So I'm the author of the infamous Wheat Belly books. You know, the Wheat Belly experience on a worldwide scale really showed us just how powerful that lifestyle was. People would say things like, well, I lost 68 pounds on the program and my blood sugar has plummeted. I'm off 3 blood pressure medicines. My ulcerative colitis is 80% better. And I'm thinner, I feel better. But what also became clear that despite those wonderful success stories, that there are many people with some residual problem. For instance, somebody says, I lost 67 pounds, but I need to lose another 38 and I'm stuck. Or my blood sugar, I was a type 2 diabetic. I was on insulin and several other drugs. My hemoglobin A1C, that long-term measure of blood sugar, dropped from a horrendous 12.4% down to a much better 5.9%. I'm off all the drugs, but I can't get it down to perfect, which is 5.0%. Or maybe someone had rheumatoid arthritis or fibromyalgia, and they say, you know what? It's 70, 80% better. I'm off that awful biologic drug that cost me all kinds of money. I'm off the prednisone that was making me fat, but I'm still on that anti-inflammatory drug on occasion with some flare-ups. Well, I asked, well, why? What was persistent? What hadn't we done? Now, in those programs, we did take basic efforts to address the intestinal microbiome. That is, the collection of microbes living in the gastrointestinal tract. We did do things like a high-potency multi-species probiotic, fermented foods, prebiotic fibers, and other factors that nourish microbes. But people still had these residual struggles. And so I looked for answers in the microbiome. Now, just as we have done a good job of damaging, disrupting the external environment, making the oceans more acidic, shrinking the coral reefs, melting the polar ice caps, having violent storms, wildfires, the same kind of thing, the same magnitude of disruption has occurred in the internal ecosystem. But of course, you don't have wildfires and tornadoes in your GI tract, right? Instead, you've lost important species. It's species that were doing important things for you. And in their place of these lost species, unhealthy microbes have proliferated to take over. And we won't talk about that second item very much tonight, given our limited time, but let's start by talking about some of the lost species lost from your GI tract. Oop, I lost control. You know what? I'm going to stop sharing. Pardon me. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I have crashed, guys.
When all else fails, quit and restart, right?
Well, I hate to do that because I'll lose everything.
Sure.
I lost control of my mouse and everything. Oh boy.
Well, I think there must be a proliferation of internet unhealthy species going on, right? We've got some bugs in your computer.
Well, I guess I'll just talk rather than waste your time having me fuss around with the computer. So sorry about that. So we've lost important species. Let's talk about two tonight. One species is Lactobacillus reuteri, Reuteri, named after the German microbiologist who discovered it in 1962. Well, reuteri is unusually susceptible to common antibiotics like ampicillin. And so if you took ampicillin or other common antibiotics, you have lost this very important species. And it's not just antibiotics. Antibiotics have proliferated wildly in our society. It's not uncommon for doctors to prescribe 800 prescriptions per 1,000 Americans every year. It's not uncommon to get to your age 40 and having taken 30 courses of antibiotics. Each time you do that, you throw a bomb into your microbiome, and you either cut back on many important species or you lose them altogether. So one of the most susceptible is Lactobacillus reuteri. Well, Lactobacillus reuteri is very important. If we were to look at indigenous hunter-gatherer populations, in some of the studies where they actually looked at the species composition, like the indigenous population in New Guinea, these are people who hunt for their food, have to run to the river to get water. They dig in the ground for roots and tubers, gather berries, gather nuts. So these people all have Lactobacillus reuteri in their GI tract. If we were to look at your dog, or the chipmunk outside your window, or the squirrel, or the gopher, or the chicken, they all have reuteri too. But over 90% of us have lost it because of all those things, antibiotics, et cetera. And it's not just antibiotics, I should mention. It's many other things. It's herbicides and pesticides in your food. It's glyphosate, the active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup. You may not know that that glyphosate in Roundup, yes, it's an herbicide. It's also a very powerful antibiotic, but it's an antibiotic of the worst kind because it kills off healthy species and doesn't kill off unhealthy species. So it actually selects for species you don't want. There are food additives that disrupt the microbiome. Food additives like emulsifying agents, polysorbate 80, carboxymethylcellulose, these long named compounds in your salad dressing, in ice cream, other drugs, stomach acid blocking drugs like Prilosec, Protonix, ranitidine, anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen, naproxen, diclofenac, statin cholesterol drugs, that awful class of drugs, they also change the microbiome. Antidepressants change the microbiome. So as modern humans, we swim in a sea of factors that disrupt the microbiome, and among the consequences is outright loss of certain species. Give me a moment. Let's see if I got control back. No. Okay. I've got partial. Oh, I got it back. Okay, here we go. So we lost important species. So I'll just run through this once again real quick. Antibiotics, C-sections. A third of Americans are now delivered by C-section. Formula feeding, which deprives a child of the microbiome of breast milk. We talk about emulsifying agents, synthetic sweeteners like aspartame, sucralose, in diet cola and other things. The drugs we talked about, chlorinated drinking water, heavy metals like mercury in fish or cadmium in shellfish. It looks like every time somebody enters, I lose control. I don't know why that is. Sorry about this, guys. Okay. Yeah. And you know what? With each passing generation, it gets worse and worse. Because if your grandparents passed on a flawed microbiome to your parent, and that parent is exposed to all these things, and then passes on a flawed microbiome to you, and then you in turn pass on your damaged microbiome to your children, it gets worse with each successive generation. But the end result for us is that we've lost important species. Now, it's, as I mentioned, it's ubiquitous. So in New Guinea, for instance, the people, their microbiome has been sequenced. They all have reuteri, as do animals. So we've all lost, or most of us have lost, Lactobacillus reuteri. So it serves as a wonderful prototype microbe to watch what happens when we restore it. And we're going to do it. I'm going to talk about making yogurt. It doesn't have to be yogurt. Yogurt's just an easy example. You can ferment. You can reintroduce this microbe by a whole bunch of other methods. But I'm going to talk about yogurt only because it's easy. It's a very forgiving vehicle for fermentation. Now, I don't know if you know this. If you buy yogurt in the grocery store, so microbes don't have sexual reproduction, right? There's no mommy and daddy microbes. They have something called asexual reproduction. One microbe becomes two, two becomes four, and so on, right? Well, reuteri takes about 3 hours to double. So if you ferment for 3 hours, you get one doubling. Well, commercial yogurt making is a 4-hour production. And that makes sense because when you're in business, you want to hasten the manufacturing process. If you had a shoe factory and it took you 2 weeks to make a pair of shoes and your competitor could make a pair of shoes in an hour, who's going to make more money, right? So you want to abbreviate production time. So that's what they do in commercial yogurt making. They ferment for 4 hours, which means one doubling, maybe two, depending on the species. That's why they add, look at the ingredient label of commercial yogurt: gellan gum, xanthan gum, guar gum, carrageenan, thickening agents, because there ain't nothing there in the way of microbes or metabolites. We're not going to do that. Even home yogurt makers often ferment for only 12 hours. That's 4 doublings for reuteri. We're going to ferment for 36 hours for 12 doublings. We perform something called flow cytometry. It's just a laser-driven way of counting microbes. And if you make yogurt this way, in this case with reuteri, over 36 hours, we get around 260 billion counts of bacteria per half cup serving. This is part of the reason why, if you do this, you're going to get a wallop of an effect, because we're getting far greater counts, certainly far greater than any kind of commercial yogurt. And of course, I made a mistake of calling this yogurt, making people think you could buy this in the store. You cannot. We're choosing microbes that are interesting, that have been lost from your microbiome. We're not using the ho-hum species of commercial yogurt, and we're going to allow multiple doublings for much higher counts. Oh boy.
We're all learning a lesson in patience tonight, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, sometimes, for some reason, anytime anybody comes in new, I seem to lose control.
Maybe we just have to wait for the reuteri to double. Is that? Well, thanks for your patience, everyone. We'll get back to it here.
So we make this reuteri yogurt, right? We're going to consume a half a cup per day. What this does, and I had some beautiful slides about this, but sorry. What this does, so reuteri takes up residence, very unusual, in the entire GI tract. not just the colon where most microbes stay, but the entire GI tract. That has great relevance, by the way, in keeping bad things from ascending up from your colon, those stool microbes. So it takes up residence in the entire GI tract. It sends a signal via the vagus nerve up through the chest, through the neck to the brain. And it tells your brain to release oxytocin. Oxytocin is the hormone of love, affection, and empathy. So we make this yogurt. People consume a half cup per day with blueberries, a squirt of stevia, whatever, chia seeds, whatever. And people say, I like my partner better. I feel more affection for him or her. I feel closer to my family. I find them less annoying. I like my coworkers better. They don't bother me as much. I introduce myself to strangers in line for coffee at Starbucks. Your people are closer to other people. They say things like, I understand other people's opinions better. So there's a whole collection of very favorable social and emotional effects. But it doesn't end there. That oxytocin boost you get out of this, the ladies love it because it increases dermal collagen significantly, meaning your skin will be thicker because skin thins as you age. It reverses, you get thicker skin with more dermal collagen, and you start to lose wrinkles. You accelerate healing. You get a return of muscle strength and muscle mass. We lose muscle mass as we get older. It comes back, especially if you throw in some kind of strength training. For the ladies, also very important, preservation of bone density. It's a very powerful effect. There's human data to that effect. There's a boost in the immune response. There's deeper sleep. I'm a chronic insomniac. I often struggle to sleep more than 4 or 5 hours a night watching TV and reading books from 2 to 5 in the morning. You know how that goes. And those hours where you start to think about all the mistakes you made in life, right? And then you wake up the next day feeling awful. Well, with the Reuteri, I sleep 9 hours a night straight through. Vivid dreams. Those of us who use actigraphic devices like the Oura Ring or an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, you'll see longer periods of REM, the restorative phase of sleep. Appetite is suppressed. Now, if you combine the appetite suppressing effect of this boost in oxytocin from Reuteri with the removal of gliadin-derived opioid peptides, anybody who's read my wheat belly books remembers this, that there's a protein called gliadin in wheat that upon partial digestion yields opioid peptide fragments that go to the brain, stimulate appetite. Well, combine that with this oxytocin boost, you will be magnificently freed from temptation. You can walk past that plate of donuts at the office, never give it a second thought. You are in control. Now, this is what happens with one microbe, and there are many others that you can choose to replace. Let me see if I got control back yet. So I do want to show you the slides on my, whoops. Oh, okay, maybe. Okay, this just shows what happens with restoration of Reuteri. Oh, I should have mentioned, well, think about this. Thicker skin, smoother skin, restoration, youthful muscle, deeper sleep, preservation of bone density, heightened immune response. I don't think it's a stretch to say what we're doing here is turning the clock back 10 or 20 years. Now, here's one of the first people to do this. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, this is not just Reuteri. She did my whole program. She's going to be wheat and grain free. She's going to replace a handful of nutrients that are lacking in modern life, not in the diet, but in modern life. For instance, you don't go to the river or stream to get your water to drink, right? You have to drink city water or bottled water, or you have to filter it. Your city filters it. Well, water filtration removes all the magnesium. So we all start with profound magnesium depletion. So we replace magnesium. I think most of you like to wear clothes in public, right? And you don't run naked, so you don't get enough vitamin D. And we live in a northern climate, so you can't get vitamin D. And if you're over age 40, you've lost a lot of the capacity to activate vitamin D in the skin. So we replace vitamin D. So the diet, wheat and grain elimination, because wheat and grain ain't what it used to be. It's something created in a laboratory. It's an 18-inch tall, high-yield semi-dwarf plant, very different from what used to be called wheat. We eliminate that, handful of nutrients. And in this case, Leslie, very nice lady, Cornell graduate, smart lady, added Reuteri. She's 65 years old. I hope you can see this. 65 years old. Now, this is a kind of an over the top one, but one of my first experiences that really drove home the fact, we're really onto something here. So that's Reuteri. Let's talk about a second microbe, Bifidobacteria infantis. Now, this has been lost by about 90% of newborns. And it's very important because Bifidobacteria infantis allows the baby who's breastfeeding from mom to digest the human milk oligosaccharides, or HMOs, that are in breast milk. These are crucial for proper neurological development and immune system development for the baby. But if the baby doesn't have the infantis and gets the mother's milk, it can't digest those oligosaccharides. Instead, it gets diarrhea and doesn't get all the benefits of those human milk, those crucial human milk oligosaccharides. How much human milk oligosaccharides are in synthetic formula? 0. So tuck that away. Important to be aware of if you're planning to have children, or you have daughters or granddaughters who are planning to have children. So what happened? What happened to this crucial microbe in babies? Well, maybe mom didn't have it, right? Mom took antibiotics, or mom had herbicide, pesticide residues in her food. So maybe mom didn't have it to pass on to the baby. I don't know if you know this, but mom and baby almost always are given antibiotics at time of delivery, almost always. What if the child is delivered by C-section, as 1 in 3 children are? It doesn't have the advantage of passing through the birth canal and getting those microbes. And of course, if you too hastily transition to bottle feeding, or in case you fail to make sufficient milk, which, by the way, is a lack of oxytocin. So think about that, right? Lack of oxytocin, lack of Reuteri, right? So, but if you transition too quickly to bottle feeding, or simply can't, or many women are so busy they just don't have the opportunity or have trouble doing it. So there's a lot of reasons why a mom doesn't pass on Bifidobacteria infantis to her newborn. So what happens when you restore Bifidobacteria infantis? Well, the baby can better use the nutrients in those human milk oligosaccharides. It grows faster. Its head is a little bit bigger. Its brain's bigger. It gets a little smarter, and it has less colic, so less fussiness. Can't see what's behind my slides because I've got all this clutter. Can you read it to me, Jenny?
Yes, it says improved nutrition, less colic. Oh, more acidic poop, less diaper rash.
Okay. Well, I don't even know this, but the poop of babies a century ago was quite acidic. Not any longer. And that's because modern children lack fatty acid byproducts of digestion. So by doing this, restore infantis, baby poop becomes more acidic. The baby is more likely to sleep through the night, and it takes longer naps. There are half as many bowel movements, an average of 4 down to 2. That means half as many diaper changes for mom and dad. Look at this, a 93% reduction in pathogens, pathogenic bacteria. The bacteria often acquired from hospitals, right? And you know all about the bad microbes in hospitals, antibiotic resistant microbes, stool microbes on the hands of staff, on the surfaces. So there's a dramatic reduction in intestinal pathogens. Have you ever heard of a very bad condition called necrotizing enterocolitis? This is more common in premature babies, but it can occur in term newborns also. It's a devastating illness that claims the lives of 30% of the children who get this. They often have to have a portion of their intestine removed. If the child gets infantis, there's a marked reduction in the potential for this devastating outcome called necrotizing enterocolitis. And as an older child, they're less likely to have asthma, less likely to have allergic nasal allergies and other sorts of allergies. They are less likely to have irritable bowel syndrome symptoms. They have a higher IQ. In other words, restoring this microbe to a newborn changes their health for a lifetime. So this is not just, fewer diaper changes is nice for mom and dad. Sleep through the night, great, right? But we're really talking about lifelong consequences of restoring this one microbe. Okay, so I can't see what I'm doing here, sorry. Now, take a look at that right slide. Just pay attention to the purple part. That reflects the increase in Bifidobacterium infantis. It comes in a newborn, it comes to dominate the entire microbiome. This is not true in adults. It's just true in the first few months of life, but it illustrates just how critical it is for this child to get that microbe. And if 90% of newborn children don't have it, you can put 2 and 2 together and see there's a real problem here. So getting it is very, very important. I'm going to go one step further, though. So this is a commercial product. I have no reason to tell you this, but the one that's been most studied of Bifidobacterium infantis is a strain called EVC001. Now, let me just, a little aside about strains. We have to pay attention to bacterial strains when we do all these things, because to illustrate, you have E. coli in your colon. Your family has E. coli. Well, what if you ate lettuce contaminated with cow manure from the Central Valley of California, which often happens, right? Well, you can die of that E. coli. Same species, different strain. So you got to pay attention to strain. It can even occasionally make life-death difference. Not usually, but it can make a difference between having a microbe that does something good for you and one that does nothing for you. So this strain of infantis, the EVC001, you can buy as a commercial product, and they tell you mix a little bit of the probiotic in a little cup with breast milk and then feed that to your baby. I'm going to suggest let's do one better. Let's have mom make yogurt or other fermented food, coconut milk, hummus, salsas, all kinds of food you can ferment. Have mom consume it while she's pregnant, or anytime for that matter, before delivery. She populates her body, her birth canal, breast tissue, skin. When she delivers her child, she gives her infant Bifidobacterium infantis the way it was supposed to have been all along, in the context of her entire microbiome. So I think a much better. Now, mom can continue to give baby that infantis, but I think it's a step better to have mom do it too. And you know what? Mom gets some benefits too. She has reduced symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome, reduced also colitis symptoms, reduced fatty liver, and even emotional benefits. So mom is doing it for baby, but mom gets benefits too by restoring this lost microbe. Now, the part that I talk about in supergut that we won't be able to talk about is when we lose these microbes like Reuteri and infantis and many others, in their place, unhealthy bacterial species have proliferated, outmuscled those good guys. And then in a great many people, by my conservative estimation, 1 in 3 Americans, 100 million Americans have had those unhealthy microbes, largely stool microbes like E. coli and Klebsiella and Salmonella. You may recognize some of those names, Staphylococcus, because they're also the species of food poisoning, because you went to have fast food and the kid flipping your burgers, didn't wash his hands after going number 2. So these are stool microbes, stool pathogens, food-borne illness sources also, where they can ascend and occupy the ileum, jejunum, duodenum, and stomach. It all adds up to 30 feet of trillions of microbes. Now, microbes don't live for decades, they live for minutes to hours. So if you've got trillions of microbes occupying all 30 feet of your GI tract, well, they're turning over rapidly. When they die, some of their breakdown products enter the bloodstream. That's a process called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. Now, even further than that, when you have this 30 feet of microbes, the small bowel isn't supposed to have trillions of microbes, and it has a very fragile single layer mucus barrier. Colon, where you're supposed to have stool microbes, has a very thick 2-layer mucus barrier. So these unhealthy microbes get where they don't belong. Their breakdown products can penetrate and enter your bloodstream. This is a very important process called endotoxemia, validated finally in 2007 by a Belgian group. But now this critical process tells us why. You can have microbes in the GI tract experienced as rosacea or psoriasis on the skin, or as joint or muscle pain of fibromyalgia, or as depression, or Alzheimer's dementia, or Parkinson's disease in the brain. In other words, this process originating in the human GI tract is causing us to redefine, reconsider virtually all common chronic diseases. Now, as fun as those fermentation projects can be, you got to do this part first. It's gotten easier. It sounds overwhelming. It sounds scary. There's a whole bunch of new things, including, by the way, I believe, this is preliminary. We have not yet validated this in a clinical trial. I believe we have a yogurt, I call it SIBO yogurt, that can eradicate that. It's very preliminary. So far, we've had great success using a yogurt to get rid of it and thereby have positive impacts on all those health conditions. Now, if you're getting overwhelmed, oh my God, all these microbes to replace, think of it like going to a restaurant. When you walk into a restaurant, waitress hands you a menu. Do you freak out and say, oh my God, I can't order all these appetizers and main courses and desserts? No, right? You pick and choose the dishes you want, right? Same thing here. If you, once you get through this process of SIBO, if you have it, right? And there's ways to validate and find out if you do. If you want smoother skin and deeper sleep and want to be a nicer person to other people, let's cultivate Lactobacillus reuteri. What if you want a thinner waist? Let's cultivate Lactobacillus gasseri. What if you want reduced pain from arthritis? Oh, let's make yogurt with Bacillus coagulans. You can pick the microbe for the effect you want. It's fun, it's inexpensive, and it is shockingly successful for so many people. Okay, thank you for listening. I'm going to try to get back control. Oh, I got control back. All right, sorry for the technical glitches, guys. It's the age of Zoom and a pandemic.
We are doing our pandemic best. That's what we keep telling ourselves in the bookstore, for sure. Well, thank you so much for all that information. What and how informative it was. Thanks for everybody for bearing with us on our technical here. As I said in the chat, if you've got questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat right now. We do have one right away. Is frequent heartburn a red flag that bad microbes have made their way into the upper GI?
It can be. You know, you're going to find that a lot of things done in conventional healthcare are nothing more than Band-Aids. So a lot of acid reflux, esophageal reflux, excess acid, a lot of it goes away just with wheat and grain elimination. So that's always worth, you know, it's not expensive to do that, right? You just do it and see if it goes away. It takes several days. And by the way, when you do that, we're getting into wheat belly territory now. There is an opioid withdrawal syndrome. So if gliadin-derived opioid peptides have an opioid effect on your brain, you stop them, many people in the first 5 days or so will experience depression, dark thoughts, nausea, headache, but recognize that this is a necessary process to undo the effects. Several days later, you feel wonderful. For odd reasons, I don't understand why, that process turns off very rapidly once you do it. And then see what that does first. If you still have it, then your acid reflux, et cetera, then it's time to think about SIBO. Now, we didn't really have a chance to dive into SIBO. There are a number of telltale signs you look for to know if you have SIBO. Things like fat malabsorption, if there's fat droplets in the toilet. There are diagnoses that are so consistently associated with SIBO that if you have those conditions, you can essentially assume you do, like fibromyalgia, restless leg syndrome, irritable bowel syndrome, any neurodegenerative or autoimmune disease. There's also this device. It's called the AIRE device, A-I-R-E. I have no relation with the company. It's just a cool device. Talks to your smartphone, blow into it, measures hydrogen gas, and the newest device measures methane. Gas is produced by microbes, not by you. You can use this to map out in your GI tract where microbes are. Are they high up in the stomach, in the duodenum, or are they in the colon 24 feet down where they're supposed to be? You don't have to buy this. It's $200, so you don't have to buy it. But by the way, compared to the conventional test, it's much cheaper. And you can use it over and over and over again. You can share it with people you're close to, not your neighbors. No one shares toothbrushes with their neighbors, right?
Especially in COVID times.
True. But that's one advantage. I think this AIRE device is a game changer for intestinal health, much as finger stick glucoses were for diabetes in the
Mhm.
1980s. It changed diabetes management dramatically. I had a faculty member when I was in medical school. She was 29 years old, type 1 diabetic. She was already blind in kidney failure and had an amputation,
Oh,
29, because they didn't have any finger sticks. They just had urine dips. And so having finger stick blood sugars in the 1980s was an absolute game changer. That's what this is. You don't have to get this. It's just an option for you in case you want. But this was a device, by the way. I used to think SIBO was rare. I thought, oh, no, that's hardly anybody has that. Till this comes out 2 years ago, thousands of people testing. It's the unusual person who doesn't test positive. You might challenge it. Maybe the device is wrong. Well, you go through whatever maneuver you go through to get rid of the SIBO, and it becomes normal.
mhm. Interesting. Okay. A question then about the yogurts you were talking about. Is it recommended or even possible to combine different microbes into one yogurt?
Yes, it is, but it depends on what kind of results you want. So if you say, I really want better skin and some of those other effects, better oxytocin, like maybe you want rotor by itself. So think of it like a backyard garden, springtime garden. So let's say it's May or June, and you lay out a 10 by 10 garden. How do you do that? Well, lay it out, pick out the weeds and sticks and stones, right? Plant seeds, and then through the growing season, water and fertilize your garden. The microbiome is exactly the same.
Mm.
We're going to prepare the soil. We're going to remove things that disrupt it, emulsifying agents, minimize exposure to antibiotics, herbicides, pesticides, choose organic foods, all those kinds of things. We're going to plant seeds. And by the way, the most important seeds are not probiotics, especially in their current form. Current probiotics have a lot of problems. Not to say you shouldn't do it, but the best way to seed your microbiome are fermented foods, the stuff your great grandma would smack you because you're not eating. Because in 1927, Frigidaire invented refrigeration, cost low enough that you could have it in your own home because of the refrigerant Freon, and all of us forgot about fermented foods, fermented meats, fermented veggies. And so most people get no flow of microbes from fermented food. So we've got to bring that back. It's probably among the most important things you can do. And you know what? It's virtually cost-free. If you make your own kombucha or kefirs or yogurts or fermented veggies on your kitchen counter, let me give you a bonus, a little one that's not in the book. A really powerful probiotic prebiotic strategy is to make what I call Saccharomyces boulardii cider. All it is, get a commercial probiotic. It's called Flora Store. Flora, Florastor. You can buy it at Target, Meijer, Walgreens, Flora Store. It's about $20. Empty a capsule into a quart or more of apple cider, not apple juice, apple cider, the cloudy stuff. It has to be refrigerated. Make sure there's no preservatives, no potassium sorbate. Cap it lightly, not tightly, lightly, because you're going to see within 24 hours, so much carbon dioxide is going to be bubbling. You see bubbles come up to the surface, so much fermentation. So you want to make sure that CO2 can escape. If you cap it too light, you could actually explode. Keep it at around 70 to 90 degrees. At the higher end is best. So what I do sometimes, I put it in the oven and turn the light on and leave it there. Or some means you want to leave it cold. You want to leave it a little warmer. After 48 hours, refrigerate to stop fermentation. What you've got is an effervescent apple drink that has much less sugar because it's fermented out the other metabolites. It's filled with high counts of Saccharomyces boulardii, which protects you from antibiotics. It protects you from traveler's diarrhea. It helps kids grow more effectively. It pushes back some of those unhealthy stool microbes. It pushes back fungal overgrowth, which is a thing we didn't talk about, but it's becoming very, very common. So, and you know what? It makes a terrific appletini. So, because the Saccharomyces is alcohol tolerant. So you can actually make a martini out of it if you want to, or just drink a quarter cup or so 2-3 times a day. It's downside if you have some kind of overgrowth of unhealthy bacteria. It's long and slow. It takes months to work. But we're talking about cider, right? And it's delicious. It's an effervescent apple drink.
Well, and if you can make your microbiome better by, having an appletini, 3 times a day. That's, I'm sure, not what you're recommending, but it could be fun every once in a while, right? Okay, so speaking of fermentation, Tammy asks, Instapots have become a popular way to make yogurt. Does the Instapot allow for proper fermentation to get the benefits of the microbes?
So it depends on how serious you get about this. If you get real serious, you're going to find that different species have different temperature preferences, meaning they reproduce better at different temperatures. So for instance, that Saccharomyces boulardii can ferment at relatively low temperatures, 70 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Rhodori likes human body temperature, 97 to 100 degrees or so Fahrenheit. It dies at about 108. Bacillus coagulans, that one that reduces arthritis pain, likes 115 to 122 degrees. So if you get real serious and want to play around with all these things, it helps to have a device where you can adjust the temperature. So some yogurt makers allow you to do that. Some sous vide devices do that. Basin or stick, these are slow meat cookers. Instant pots, there's some other devices. Ideally, you have an adjustable temperature and timing. If you have a device already, you want to give it a try, and it has a preset temperature, you want to run it for an hour with a thermometer in it, because conventional yogurt makers, for instance, are typically set to 108 to 114 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you put your water in there, it'll kill it. Mm. So before you waste a batch, you want to run that device and put a thermometer in it. So find your device. Don't make it tougher than it is. My first batches, I used to put in the oven. Turn the oven on to any temperature for about 45 seconds to a minute. Turn it off. Got to remember to turn it off, though. And do that every 4 to 6 hours. I did maybe my first 30 batches without a single failure, but you do have to remember to turn the oven off. So yes. I've done that too, where I forgot.
Yes. That's how I get my dough ready for making bread. Turn on the oven so it gets nice and toasty, but then turn it off right away. But yes, don't turn it back on again when you have something in there. Okay, another question about this rhodori. Am I saying that properly? Mm-hmm. Okay. Can it increase libido?
Yes. Make all the kids leave the room, right? Yes, it does. So it does so in both men and women. We don't know exactly why. We have several clinical trials, animal and human, planned. It's one of the things I'd like to. There's so much interesting just about that one microbe. There's so many interesting microbes. Rhodori is really endlessly fascinating. It does seem to increase libido, so much so. I do this every Wednesday night with my audience, 70 to 100 people every Wednesday night join me, not tonight, of course. And we talk about these things. Well, can I tell you an embarrassing story?
Absolutely.
So I get
it's that, a safe Zoom space.
like everybody else, I get that surge of warmth and empathy for other people. But one night, I tried a very high potency, different strain of rhodori. I had this vivid dream about this imaginary woman who I didn't know. I could see every detail, her eye color, her hair, her facial features. And she introduced herself to me first and last name, which I've never had happen before. But I had this overwhelming feeling of love and affection for this imaginary woman. I wake up. The overwhelming feeling of love and affection persisted for many hours into the day. It was almost an intoxicating feeling. So I asked my audience, hey, has anybody else experienced this? A whole bunch of people. Not quite like that, but I do get a lot of erotic dreams now since I've been eating the rhodori. And there were a handful of people who said I had to cut back to every second or third day because my libido was too high. So watch out. Now, if we believe the experimental evidence, males experience a marked increase in testosterone, more of a normalization of testosterone. It's not a drug, right? We're not giving you testosterone. It more like normalizes to a young person's testosterone. This has not yet been explored in females. We will do that in one of our clinical trials down the road. But there does seem to be a major contribution to libido and also to maybe some sexual hormones.
Interesting. This a little outside of the focus of the conversation, but talk about the impacts of things like this rhodori on something like dreams. What's the connection there with the microbiomes and having more vivid dreams? Do you have any insight on that? That's a really interesting connection to me.
There's several things we've stumbled on that have had major effects on dream content. So the oxytocin from rhodori has a major effect. There's another species called Lactobacillus casei, C-A-S-E-I, Shirota strain, S-H-I-R-O-T-A. You buy this as this wacky little commercial product called Yakult, Y-A-K-U-L-T. It comes from Japan. And it's an awful little product because it's made with skim milk and sugar. And it has low counts, 6.5 billion per container. Well, we ferment that like we do to high counts. So we get hundreds of billions. And by the way, there are 3 clinical trials where 100 billion of this microbe reduces the incidence of respiratory viral illnesses by 50%. And this is yogurt, by the way. And if you get a viral illness, it's abbreviated by 50%. Now, many of us who fermented that yogurt got even deeper sleep, even more extended wild dreams. I had to stop it because I went from an insomniac to 9 hours of sleep on Rotary to 12 hours of sleep on the combination. And you and I have things to do. You can't be sleeping 12 hours. So I had to stop it. But there seems to be some individuality, some variation, some of these responses. It's not quite clear why, Jenny. How is it oxytocin? Is it other things? But it is becoming clear that many microbes have individual effects on neurotransmitters. So we're getting close to this. You want oxytocin? Get Rotary. You want serotonin? Get Taurisibacter sanguinis. Don't write that down. You can't get it right just yet. If you want dopamine, get this microbe. If you want increased energy from norepinephrine and epinephrine, get this microbe. We're getting very close to that kind of thing. You can imagine big pharma doesn't like this very much, right? We're getting very close being able to prescribe or restore lost microbes for very specific mental and emotional and social health effects.
Right. Which the prescriptions for and the medications and the treatments for those type of afflictions, if you will, would all be underscored by what you're suggesting here. As you say, big pharma would not be very happy about that. That's a lot of money.
It is, but it's getting that powerful. I mean, think about it. If this was 1980 and I said to you, we're going to replace a microbe and you're going to have smoother skin with fewer wrinkles, a restoration of youthful muscle, protection from respiratory viruses, healthier babies that have higher IQs as adults, less, you'd say, what? No way, right? These are very, very potent effects. But you know what I love about this? It puts the control in your hands. You don't need your doctor to do this, right? Because if you say to the doctor, Doc, listen, I think I have SIBO. No, you don't. There's nothing wrong with you. Did you consult Dr. Google? The likely answer. Or, hey, what do you think about replacing lost Lactobacillus rhodori for an oxytocin boost and maybe getting some positive? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't waste my time, right? So we have, unfortunately, a healthcare system not bent on the newest science to provide health. It is a system built on dispensing pharmaceuticals and procedures, right? And that's just a sad, I wish it wasn't that way, but it is. So that's bad because you can't get the assistance of most mainstream MDs. It's good because it means you have extraordinary power in your own hands.
So is there anywhere, you're talking about the healthcare system, and we were chatting a little bit before we started about this too. Is there any cultures across the world that are getting this right, that include these types of foods naturally, that haven't lost so many of these microbes?
Yeah, great question, Jenny. Yeah, so there are indigenous hunter-gatherer populations, such as the Yanomami in the Brazilian rainforest, the Matsas in the highlands of Peru, the Malawi on Eastern Africa, the Maasai in the Kenyan savanna, the Hadza in the Tanzanian savanna, the Maori people in New Zealand, the isolated tribes of New Guinea. These are people who don't take antibiotics for the most part. They don't have herbicides and pesticides. They get up in the morning, grab a spear, club, or axe, go kill something, dig in the dirt for roots and tubers, gather berries and nuts, don't bathe too often, don't have running water. They have to go to the stream or river. They kill an animal, often at the site of the kill, tear its abdomen open and eat the intestines, eat the stomach, sometimes eat the liver and the brain. That's the probiotic that's but most people don't want to do that, right? But that's how they do it. Their microbiomes are very different from ours. Curiously, Those microbiomes, these are populations on different parts of the planet, different continents. They don't have smartphones, they don't have airplanes. They live and stay in much the same place in a small area, yet their microbiomes look much the same. So microbiologists, anthropologists have speculated that that may represent the so-called Stone Age microbiome, the microbiome that we used to have. If you compare what we have, there's almost no overlap. We have species they don't have, they have species we don't have, and they have a much larger collection of microbes. We have a much reduced because we've lost so many species.
Wow. And that would probably, is there fermentation happening in those diets of those types of cultures? Or is that just the way we're replacing what they have?
These cultures often do have fermentation. They might not call it fermentation, they might just call it rotten fruit. You know, if you go to the Europeans and the Asians are still much better at this than we are. If you go to parts of Europe, Spain, Italy, Greece, you'll see they cut a big piece of meat, raw meat, put it in the town square on a stick, cover it with a rag to keep the flies off. It's raw meat, and then come back in a week or 2 or 3 or 4, take off a slice and eat it. And it's delicious. So, but most modern people are too squeamish to do that anymore. We've gotten away from eating tongue and heart and thymus and intestine. But you know what? We're going to inch back in that direction. An easy way to get intestine is to eat the casings on sausages. Bring back some liver by getting some ground liver and combine it with ground beef and get all the nutrients. One of the other things we haven't talked about, because it's kind of off topic, is the modern diet is deficient in collagen and hyaluronic acid. Because we don't eat organs, because we don't slow cook tough cuts of meat, because we don't take the carcass of an animal we just consume, make soup, stews, or broths out of it, rich in collagen. And if you're lacking collagen, because you're not doing those things, and hyaluronic acid, your skin ages faster.
I was going to say, those are big keywords in like the skincare beauty world, certainly.
Yes.
For someone at my stage of life. Yes. Yes.
Your arteries age faster. So you could go back, eat more brain, heart, intestine, stomach, liver, or the modern equivalent, get collagen hydrolysates and hyaluronic acid.
Well, I have to say, I don't know that I was fully prepared for that discussion, as you happen to be speaking to a longtime vegetarian. But this is so fascinating to think about how, you know, as we've evolved as a culture, you know, what that means for our diet and therefore what's inside of us and how we function. So thank you for all of that and really enlightening information. I think we've hit all of the questions up in the chat. So I think what that means is that your presentation was so informative that we all need time to process to get all that information out. But I want to thank you so much, Dr. Davis, for being with us tonight and sharing all of that with us.
Thank you, Ginny. Thank you, everybody. If you want more on this, of course, there's a Super Gut book. I just transitioned my longstanding Wheat Belly blog that had 30 million visits. I had so many blogs and social, I combined them all under one umbrella. If you want to hear more about this, it's Dr. Davis, Dr. Davis, infinitehealth.com.
drdavisinfinitehealth.com. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I know there are some folks in here that are very interested in that. I think there's a couple of colleagues on here as well. So thank you all for being with us. If you did order a copy of the book as part of your admission this evening, we'll get that out to you just as soon as we can. I did drop the link in the chat. If you still need a copy, feel free to order those. And I think I got signed book plates from you, Dr. Davis. So those are signed copies as well. So if you are interested in that, please get an order and we'll get that out to you. We did have to close the bookstore a little early today because of the snow, but I think we're going to be up back and running tomorrow. So we'll get that out to you just as soon as we can. But to everyone, thank you for your time and for being with us. You will get an email from us when your book is ready, but stay safe out there. Dr. Davis, thank you for your time and your information. And hopefully we can get to visit you hopefully in person sometime soon.
Night, everybody. Stay safe.
Yes. Happy reading, everybody. Stay safe. Good night.